Hi everyone, welcome to Online Piano Learning. My name is Sarah and today we're talking about intervals. An interval is the distance between two notes. In order to figure out the distance, we have to start from the bottom note and count our way up. For example, let's take a look at C to E. If we start on C and we count 1 on C, then we have 2 on D and 3 on E. This makes it a third. Let's do one more example. If we start on C and go up to G, then we have a fifth. This is because we started counting on C and we counted up to 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, now the next step. We have to figure out if these intervals are major, minor, perfect, diminished, or augmented. Now, what is the difference between all of these? Well, let's take a look. In order to figure out what type of interval we're looking at, we have to look at the bottom note and figure out the key. This means knowing what the scale is and the key signature. Our first example was C to E. This is an example of a major third. The perfect intervals in a major scale are the perfect unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and perfect octave. All the other intervals are major. These are all perfect intervals because they're slightly different than the major intervals, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Let's talk about major intervals. These are all the other intervals that are left, from C to D, which is a second, C to E, which is a third, C to A, which is a sixth, and C to B, which is a seventh. Let's go back to the example of C and E. This one is a major third because the bottom note is C, and in C major, we have an E natural. So it's not an E flat, it's not an E sharp. Let's do our second example with C and G. If we look at the C major scale, we do have a G. It's already there, we don't have to raise it or lower it. And that means that it's a perfect fifth. Now let's figure out what the difference is between major and perfect intervals. So sometimes when you're looking at an interval, for example, C and E flat, the top note clearly doesn't belong in the C major scale. So we have to figure out what was done to the top note in order to make it an E flat. If it was lowered, it is a minor third. A minor interval is when we take a major interval and we lower the top note by a half step. Our E natural is now an E flat. That makes C to E a minor third. Now let's take a look at the C and G. What would happen if we lower the top note? So that is the difference between major and perfect intervals. If we lower the G, and we lower it to a G flat, so lower it down a half step, that would not be a minor interval. That would be a diminished interval. The only way that you can make a diminished interval from a major interval is if you lower it to the minor interval. So like we did, we got C and E flat with our third, right? If we lower it again and it's a double flat, that would make it a diminished third. Whereas the fifth that we just looked at, that one, if we lower it a half step, it automatically becomes diminished. So we're skipping over that step of a minor interval. Now there's one more interval we didn't mention, which is the augmented interval. Augmented intervals are pretty simple because they are the same with major and perfect intervals. If you raise the top note by a half step, then you get an augmented interval. So with C and E, the E, if you raise it and it becomes an E sharp, that would make it augmented. Don't get it mixed up with an F. I know it looks like an F on the piano, but it's not an F because remember we said C to F is a perfect interval. So that is the difference. It's the letter name that counts. If you raise the G and it becomes a G sharp, that would make it augmented. Let's summarize the perfect intervals and major intervals and what happens when we raise them and lower them. Let's start with the major intervals. So we have a major interval like C and E. If we lower the top note, it becomes minor. If we lower the top note again by a half step, it becomes diminished. If we raise the major interval, it becomes augmented. And let's go and take a look at the perfect intervals. If we have a perfect interval and we lower the top note, it becomes diminished. And if we raise the top note, it becomes augmented. So we skip the step of going down to a minor interval. As you can see, intervals in C major are pretty straightforward, but it gets a bit trickier when you have different key signatures to work with. So let's do an example in a couple other keys. Let's find a major seventh above G. In order to do that, you're going to have to know what the G major scale looks like. The G major scale has one sharp, which is an F sharp. So now let's play the G major scale and get to the seventh note and figure out what that is. Starting on G, so counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we land on an F sharp. So make sure that in your major seventh, it is an F sharp. Now let's do a perfect fourth above F. In order to do that, you're going to have to know that F major has one flat, which is a B flat. Let's play the scale and see what the fourth note is. Starting on F, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth note is a B flat. That makes it a perfect fourth. A perfect fourth above F is B flat. Before I go, let's do a mini pop quiz. What is a minor seventh above C? If you know the answer, please write it in the comments. I would love to see if you got it right. If you are not sure how to figure out what sharps or flats are in each scale, or you're not sure how to build a scale, I recommend you go ahead and watch those videos. I will have one on scales, building scales based off of whole steps and half steps, using the circle of fifths, and also a bunch of shortcuts. If you thought this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more theory videos. If you have any theory topics you would like me to cover, please let me know and I would love to add them to my content. I'll see you in the next video.